I am Mariana Anaya, and I'm here with Griselda Martinez and the family lawyer Dustin Collier, who is the family lawyer for the case for Specialist Enrique Roman Martinez. And we thought it would be a good idea to have Dustin join us so that he can guide us how we can help the family spread about Enrique's story, and not only that, but also advise us and just really give us case updates. Of course, as the public, we like to support the family, but we also, we want to know more about the story, what's going on, if there's anything that we can do to help, and so that we can help the family receive the justice that they deserve. So, Dustin, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate you being here today. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background and how it is that you got started with the Martinez family, and what was it about the case that you were like, I'm going to take the case?
Yeah, so a little bit of background, I guess, to start off there. I grew up in the South in Sherwood, Arkansas, and I lived there till I was about 21. Moved out to California for law school, and then I stayed. And I have my own firm in the Bay Area with one partner now, Joshua Sox, who's also co-counsel with me for the family. And we primarily do employment and personal injury litigation. So we represent workers in suits against their employer for discrimination, for whistleblower retaliation, unpaid wages, that sort of thing. The way I learned about this case and this situation is that in 2018, I tried a case against the city of Long Beach, a whistleblower retaliation case. Our client, Tomas Gonzalez, was a former investigator for the Citizens Police Complaint Commission in the city of Long Beach, who had blown the whistle on certain allegations of police brutality being sort of swept under the rug, and he was terminated for it. We prevailed in that trial, and actually there was a new story today in the Long Beach Post, I think.
I've actually heard of him.
Yeah. So Tomas had a long history in sort of the labor movement. He assisted with the grape strikes that Cesar Chavez led some 3 or 4 decades ago.
Yeah.
Very, very actively involved in LULAC. And his brother is on the LULAC board, his brother Leonard Gonzalez, who is also a witness in that trial, and who I became pretty good friends with because he was there every day. Tomas has some health problems as well. Leonard was there as sort of, to assist Tomas in and out of the courtroom. Tomas was in a wheelchair at the time. Anyways, Leonard learned about this case from the press reports and from LULAC members coming forward. And obviously, it's a big concern for LULAC right now, this unusual pattern of Latin American soldiers being killed or disappearing, mostly at Fort Hood in Texas, but also here at Fort Bragg. So LULAC is very much interested in understanding why there's this pattern emerging, what the Army is doing to get to the bottom of whether there are any connections between these cases and what they may be.
Are they in contact with you in regards to Enrique's case?
Yes. In fact, I have a call with them on Friday. They're going to debrief me on a meeting they had with the Undersecretary of the Army a couple of weeks ago. But they've been as helpful in the background in applying pressure to the FBI and also to the Army, the Department of Defense, to ensure that these things are getting the attention that they deserve. And initially, Leonard and Tomas contacted me wanting to know if I could refer them to someone to assist the family with this case. But after I read the story, it really pulled at my heartstrings, and I wanted to help personally. And you mentioned before we began what a great sister Griselda is. When I met with her, that was definitely my impression as well. Is here's a sister who deeply cares about her brother, and whose brother has suffered this tragic, horrendous crime.
Mhm.
And if there's anything I can do to help them, I would like to. And also to just help LULAC with sort of you know, uh, the broader investigation into why is this happening across the country. Um,
Yeah.
and they may turn
So
out
this
to
is
all
even
be,
much big. I mean, it's obviously, this case is huge, but I mean, it goes beyond even Enrique's case. There's just so many things happening. Like you said, a lot of Latino soldiers being disappeared or murdered, and
yeah,
or suicide, based on suicide. That it's a
yeah.
huge attention right now.
I mean, I don't know if these things are connected, but they are definitely similar enough, and there's enough of a pattern that it warrants investigation, thorough investigation. And if a pattern does emerge, um, and there's something to be done about it, it's something I'm very much eager to assist with if we can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for right now, I see my role as helping Enrique's family get to the bottom of what happened, just what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as long as we stay laser focused on getting answers to those questions, I think it will become apparent what, if any, ties that has to what's happening at Fort Hood.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
At Fort Hood,
so
and then this being at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, do you think there may be some kind of connection there?
yeah, I mean, I'm an attorney by trade. We're trained to be sort of skeptical and not jump to conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I won't say that I believe it yet, but I believe that there's enough indicators that these things may be related that it warrants exploration, and I want to know the answer to that question. Um, one thing one thing that I have followed through the summer, the New York Times has been reporting on it, the Washington Post has been reporting on it, and FBI Director Chris Wray has testified in Congress about it. Since Donald Trump was elected president in 2016, there's been a real resurgence of sort of the white supremacist movement.
Yes.
Uh, and not just white supremacist and sort of neo-Nazi and fascist type organizations. And it's not just in the South where you might expect, but you see it resurgent across the country, and you see it resurgent across Europe.
Wow.
Um, and there was some excellent reporting by the New York Times this summer where they uncovered sort of neo-Nazi network within their special forces military. And when I heard about this case, it struck me, wow, that's an odd series of coincidences. I wonder if we might have a similar infiltration happening in our military. And
Mm-hmm.
whereas over there, sort of the neo-Nazi groups are really outraged about migration from the Middle East, Syrian refugees and that sort of thing. Here, the sort of neo-Nazi and white supremacist groups are very much, I mean, it's obvious,
Mm-hmm.
very much upset about migration from Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know if these things are connected. I don't know if it's going to turn out that there's some organization involved in this sort of string of murders and suicides and disappearances. Um, but I also think that given the political climate and the tenor and the fact that this has already been uncovered in Germany and that sort of thing, it's something we should be alert to. And we know from the FBI's briefings to Congress that there's been a spike in hate crimes over the last 4 years.
There has been.
And this sort of comes full circle to my background as well. I mentioned that I grew up in the South. I'm, no offense to anybody's politics, but I'm very liberal. Um, and it's part of the reason I left there and moved to the Bay Area in California. Um, but it hasn't really been a shock to see this sort of white supremacist resurgence in light
And
of
it's
Trump's
because you
presidency.
grew up in the South, so you saw that growing up a lot.
I did. I saw it all around me in the South, and I also saw how people would, speak these things out loud in private, but in public pretend to,
Have a
not
shield.
have these exactly not have these racist tendencies and so on and so forth. And
Wow.
because I'm a white man growing up in the South, they feel comfortable saying these things around me, not knowing that I don't agree with them, and
Yeah.
certainly not knowing that I would eventually become a civil rights attorney. Um,
Wow.
uh,
Which is
so
perfect while you're here and helping the Martinez family for Enrique's case.
I
That's
am doing what I can. Yeah,
Thank you. So I know you. How long have you been working on the case with the family?
I guess it's. I think you all first contacted me in June, if I recall
Yeah,
correctly.
June. Yeah.
So it's been a few
A
months.
few months. Have you been seeing a change with the military, with the FBI? What is it that the Army is doing right now and the FBI doing to for the investigation for Enrique's case?
Well, yeah. Um,
If you can share anything of this, of course.
there are limits on what I can share, but I think what I can say definitively is that since I came on board, we've had weekly briefings. There's a prosecutor in charge out of what they call the Criminal Investigations Division in the Army, um, who apparently there's a joint FBI and Army task force running this investigation,
Oh,
but the Army division has taken the lead. I have some concerns about that, but I'll put a pin in that for a second.
yeah.
Um,
As soon as you said it, I was like,
yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's always ideal if you're going to conduct an investigation to have it conducted externally. Uh, but regardless, we don't get to call those shots. Uh, we can only, sort of oversee it, try and keep an eye on it. And if it appears that they haven't handled it correctly, there may be actions we can take down the road to address that deficiency later. But since I came in, they've had the lead prosecutor from the Army in contact with me once a week to update me on the status of the investigation. And he's been really good about keeping me apprised. His name is Major Cal Walters. Um, he's been really good about keeping me apprised of sort of procedurally what they're doing. We're interviewing X number of witnesses this week. We've sent, such and such number of items to the lab for DNA analysis and, things of that nature. And assuming that,
So they have been speaking to witnesses right now, and
yes,
they do have items that they have sent over for DNA.
yes, that is my understanding.
Are you able
Um,
to
I,
share what kind of items or who those
well,
witnesses may be?
I'm not, and this is where I get disappointed. So even though they've been sort of very open with me about sort of the stages of what they're doing, the details of what they're finding, they are keeping very close to the chest. And there are legitimate reasons why you might want to do that as an investigator, at least with certain sensitive details. But
Mhm.
there are other things, other details, where I do not, frankly, understand the rationale for withholding the information from us. I noticed somebody posted in the chat
Yes,
a question about the 7 individuals
yes.
who were on the camping trip. And I mean, really, how much more basic can it be for bringing this family some answers and some closure than to tell them who was with their brother or their son
Hmm.
when he was killed?
Exactly.
It's such a basic piece of information, and I can't imagine any way in which it could possibly jeopardize a future prosecution to just tell us who was there.
Exactly.
Um, but
It doesn't necessarily mean that that's who did it. It just means
no,
who was there with him in those last moments of his life, or the last day, even the
yeah,
last few hours.
and and it's disappointing to me because even that bit of information they've been unwilling to share. And the one of the things that is sort of inexplicable about it
Hmm.
is that we have been having these weekly briefings. There are a few details that they've shared with me that are not public knowledge. and that I've committed to keep quiet, and the family is committed to keep quiet, and
Mhm.
we've honored those promises. We've given them ample evidence that they can actually trust us
Mhm.
with some of this information, and I don't expect them to tell me everything a witness said in their interview, or every. I don't expect them to share every lab report that they've gotten back, or anything like that. It's
Mhm.
there's a reasonable amount of secrecy for an ongoing investigation that makes sense to me as an attorney.
Mhm.
Um, but the level of secrecy that they have concerns me. It concerns me greatly, and
And this is from
uh,
the Army side, correct? The Army
I'm
investigation.
sorry.
This is from the Army side, the Army
Correct.
investigation.
That's correct. I haven't had any contact with the FBI, and
At
that's
any point, do you have a conversation with them? Is there any point where you guys would meet? I mean, I would assume since you're the lawyer of the family and
yeah.
the investigation.
It's possible, but there's an interesting wrinkle here as well, Mariana, which is
Yeah.
um, that jurisdictionally, either of these agencies could be investigating because the event appears to involve service members, so there's Army jurisdiction to investigate, but it occurred at a national park, which gives the Department of Justice and the rest of the federal government, the FBI, jurisdiction to investigate. Either one of them could have taken the lead here, and I think I already alluded to. I think it probably would have been more appropriate, if nothing else, for political considerations, to have the FBI in charge. What I've been told is that the Army is in charge, and that's why they're my point of contact. There are ethical restrictions on a lawyer too. Lay persons may not be aware of this, but once I'm told that a particular lawyer represents a party, and in this case, the Army or the investigators, I'm not allowed to communicate with anyone about the circumstances of that representation except that attorney. And the idea is to stop me from going behind the attorney's back and talking directly to their client, right?
Mhm.
That's the purpose of the rule. And so it sort of restricts me at this point, since they've said, here's your point of contact. This is the person who's going to brief you every week. I am limited to speaking to that person. I do believe there are other individuals at the Army and perhaps with the Department of Justice who have had direct briefings with the family, but I cannot speak to those people directly.
Oh, got it. But they would be okay to speak directly to Griselda and her sister and their mom.
Correct. In fact, so the clients are free to talk to each other all day long. It's the lawyers who have that ethical restriction.
Wow.
And just as I'm not allowed to speak to, for example, the soldiers who went on that camping trip, just as I'm not allowed to speak directly to them, the Army's not allowed to speak directly to Griselda or her mother without coming through me because
Got
I'm
it.
representing them.
Got it.
Um, now we've set up a system where they're giving regular briefings to the family, and I've okayed that, but I could pull the plug on it at any time. I have no reason to do that right now, but
What would
if
be
I
a
felt like they
reason?
were
What
well,
would be a
if I felt like they were doing something untoward, as far as the family is concerned, if I felt like they were in any way trying to manipulate the family, or if
Mhm.
I felt like, certainly if they did something like try to get the family to sign some sort of release of claims or something like that without running it by me, this is something where it was clear on a legal issue they were trying to bypass me.
Yeah.
That would be the last time they spoke to them directly. But that has not occurred, with one sort of minor exception that we were able to clear up, and that was recent. Um,
Are
so,
you
and
able to
I
share
think
about
I'm not comfortable sharing the details of that particular issue, but Griselda, I'm sure, knows what I'm referring to.
Yes, and we made sure that we got what we wanted because it's not about them, it's about us.
Right.
And they made the exception, so they just know that we're being cooperative and we're not asking for much. And they need, at this point, really, they really need to be giving us everything that we do want.
I do think that they could be more forthcoming
Yes.
with information coming out of the investigation. It's a little early from my perspective to tell if they're being hyper cautious, or if there's a more malicious intent, a cover up style intent. I do think that'll come out in time, and the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. Um, they have led us to believe that the investigation will be largely concluded in the coming months, and that we should uh, uh, know what they're going to do as far as prosecuting people, if anyone, no later than the first of the year. Um,
So by the end of the
if
year, you feel like they're gonna be able to have people arrested of who did this to him?
Well, so that part I don't know. Uh, there's two layers to this, right? They have to complete their investigation. It is ongoing. My understanding is there's a few moving parts to that are not concluded. The investigation itself, they expect to wrap up in the next few months, which is to say that I think by the end of the year, it will be in the prosecutor's hands to decide whether and who to charge and what to charge them with. Um, and up until this point, they've been very cautious, I think, about committing to any particular charging decision. And that makes
It's
some
not on the
sense.
prosecution side yet. Okay.
Well, the prosecutors are aware of the current state of the evidence, um, but it is premature, I think, for them to decide who they're going to charge and for what, given that they are still actively collecting evidence and trying to piece together what happened. It is a good, sound strategy, I think, for any lawyer, and particularly a criminal prosecutor, to make sure you've sort of turned over every stone and gotten all the facts straight before you make any decisions about what you're going to do with that evidence.
Yeah.
But essentially, they've committed to me that within the next few months, we should know what those decisions are. And once we know what those decisions are, then we can start to demand answers about why those are the decisions that were made. And it will become clearer whether this was a legitimate investigation or whether they've sort of been stringing us along. I'm cautious.
There's a comment from Desiree. It sounds like the Army is trying to sweep this under the rug like everything else. It sounds like they're waiting for everyone to move on, lose focus. What is your plan if the Army decides to do that, which they probably will?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be clear. Yeah, I want to be clear that I have not drawn the conclusion they're sweeping this under the rug yet. I think that if everything that they're telling me about the investigation is true, they are in fact conducting a very thorough investigation. They are in fact throwing a lot of resources at it. But like I said, I think the proof will be in the pudding. Right now, what I have is what they're telling me, right? I don't have toxicology reports. I don't have lab reports. I don't have any hard evidence. I don't have witness statements. The sorts of things that as a lawyer I would analyze after they've made charging decisions, that I would analyze to see, do I agree with their charging decisions, that there was insufficient evidence to prosecute this person or there was sufficient evidence to prosecute this person. Once I have...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dustin. At what point do you receive that information, like the toxicology, all those reports? When do you get those so that you can review those?
Yeah, so there's a lot of this stuff presumably will be public record at some point, and there's Freedom of Information Act at the federal level that allows you to request public records on demand, and there's a very quick turnaround, in fact, of 10 days to turn it over. But there's an exception to the act for an ongoing investigation, right? And so right now we can't really deploy that particular tool to try and get at the underlying information. And if we tried, they would assert that exception as a defense to not turning the information over. So once they've made decisions about who they're going to charge or not, though, you're no longer in the midst, presumably, of an active investigation. And that justification for not sharing that information goes away. There will still probably be some sensitive details that are like under seal by court order all the way through to verdict. If there is a prosecution and a trial, once all that's over and all the appeals are over, which can take quite some time, there's no longer any justification for holding any of that evidence back, right? Um, but essentially, there'll be different points in the process where more and more of that information should become public record, and thus we can use legal mechanisms to get our hands on it. If they won't disclose it voluntarily, I'm cautiously optimistic that with our weekly briefings with them now, we're laying the groundwork for them to be more open and disclose more voluntarily in the future. As I noted, though, I'm disappointed with how little that effort has yielded for us thus far.
Is there
That
is sorry to interrupt, Dustin? You're saying obviously you're disappointed in the fact that they haven't been able to share so much information with you and the family
Yeah.
directly. Is there anything that we can do to help? You know, as the community, I know that a lot of us want to help, but we just don't know where to start or what to
Yeah.
do. Obviously, we've signed the petitions. You know, we've donated if we could, but as a community, what do you suggest?
Yeah, certainly. I understand that there's been sort of a GoFundMe campaign as well. That will come in handy if and when we have to take any sort of legal action in the future. It will help to finance the steps that we need to take. We, for example, at some point in the future, we may retain our own forensic experts. We likely will retain our own forensics experts to review the forensic evidence that was gathered and let us know if it looks like the conclusions that were drawn are supported by that evidence. You have to sort of be a forensic expert to understand what you're looking at. But in litigation, we often will hire experts like that to advise the lawyers on what we should be looking for, where it looks like things were perhaps swept under the rug, or conversely, they may tell us, no, it looks like they did a thorough job and they reached the right result and all that sort of stuff, in which case we know it was done correctly. So that's a very expensive process. I'm sure helping the family financially with that would be helpful. On the on the on the aspect of trying to get them to disclose more information publicly now, I think there's a couple different things people could do. First, I think that Congress should be taking a look at what's happening in the Army. And this goes back to sort of LULAC's efforts. They've already been sort of lobbying some individuals in Congress and lobbying the FBI to make this a broader investigation into what's going on in the Army with this series of deaths. I know there's a couple members of Congress that the family has been in touch with, that Griselda has been communicating with, who have an interest in getting answers to some of these same questions that we're all asking. I actually think that these paths are not mutually exclusive. There's no reason that the Army can't be investigating this while Congress is also investigating it. So you can call your congresswoman or congressman, you can call your senators, and demand that they do some congressional hearings on this, that they bring in the Secretary of the Army and Undersecretary of the Army and ask them what they're doing about this. Ask tough questions about why the Army is handling this investigation internally and not just deferring to the FBI. The FBI, from my understanding, which is admittedly not, I'm not there, but my understanding is the FBI has more expertise in what sort of hate groups and networks are out there across the country and what kind of activity they're engaged in. And I just think that they probably are better poised to discern if there is some underlying neo-Nazi or white supremacist organization underlying this series of murders.
Do you think white supremacy has something to do with this case, with Enrique's murder?
That's a really difficult question to answer, precisely because of how little information we've gotten about. We know at this point that they have done extensive interviews of many people who were on the camping trip, people who knew the people on the camping trip, other people at the base, but we know nothing about what any of those witnesses said. And that is going to tell you more than most anything else about who may have had a motive and what that motive might have been, and all that sort of stuff. So
Wow.
it's really hard. It's really hard for us right now. This is the thing is, we know a lot about who's working on the case and, what they're doing day to day on the case. But we don't know anything about the results, really. I shouldn't say anything. They've disclosed a few details, but not enough to piece together,
Yeah.
was this a hate crime? Was this a crime of passion? Was this just a senseless murder? Was it an accident that then turned into a cover up? We just don't know the answers to these questions.
Have they disclosed with you a possible a main person who's under investigation, maybe a murder weapon or anything that may
They have disclosed some of those details to us. Those are some of the details they've asked us to play close to the chest. So rather than comment on that, what I would like to comment on is what's already been publicly reported.
Yes.
Okay. And I want to be clear that right now I'm not relaying anything that the investigators have told me, just my own review of the news reporting and the public reporting out there. It's pretty obvious to me that Alex Becerra has something to hide. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that name already, but he was one of the other. He was one of the other individuals that was on the trip, and it's been publicly reported that he phoned in the 911 call, and the transcript of the 911 call has been made publicly available. And we know from our own just independent investigation, apart from what the FBI and the Army are doing, that he lied to the 911 operator.
And that's speaking about like he couldn't find anybody to ask for help, right? When he had already seen two rangers.
Correct. His story essentially suggests that they spent the day searching for somebody to report Enrique missing to, and that they couldn't find a park ranger, when in reality they were cited by a park ranger for a traffic violation earlier in the day, and that ranger, I think, confirmed even in that same public reporting that nobody mentioned anything about a missing person when that park ranger interacted with them.
And you would think if they were so concerned about their friend missing, that they would have told the ranger immediately, or waited half an hour from the time they woke up that they didn't see their friend to even call. Not wait, I think 17 hours they waited to call 911.
Assuming that the timeline they've given is accurate. I don't assume that either. Again, just because a witness says he was gone for 17 hours doesn't necessarily mean that's true. So there's a lot of things I withhold judgment about as far as the actual facts, because we know what the stories are that are being woven, but we don't know how much of it is accurate, and we don't know how many of the witnesses may have told a different version of the story in their interviews, because we don't know the details of the interviews.
I think we heard.
The one thing we know. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the one thing that is apparent is that Alex Becerra, at a minimum, was not forthcoming with that 911 operator. That doesn't necessarily mean that he did anything to Enrique. And it doesn't necessarily mean he knows anything about what happened to Enrique. But it does suggest a guilty conscience, that there's something he didn't want the authorities to know about. And I don't know what that thing is yet. Obviously, one possibility is that he's somehow involved in what happened to Enrique. But I don't think that's exclusive. It could have been that he was super drunk and didn't want to do it. It could be, my understanding is that while they were out on this camping trip, they were actually in violation of orders that had been given to them by the base to remain within, I want to say, within 50 miles.
Yes, yeah, 50 miles.
Within 50 miles of the base. It may be that he was reluctant to tell them what they'd been up to because he didn't want to get in trouble for violating that order. It could be that simple and that innocent, which is still not innocent, but compared to homicide, it's innocent. This is why I wish they would give us more information so that we know how much of these things, areas where we have suspicion like this, how much of it is warranted and how much of it may have a perfectly innocent explanation.
Well, for the investigation,
Now,
for the investigation, 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 for Yeah, so I know you mentioned already Alex Becerra. He's the one that made the 911 call. Thank you for sharing that information with us. It boggles me to even think that so many people have know who the 7 people were who were with Enrique in
Yeah.
his last moments during that camping trip, and no one has kind of stepped up or even reached out to the family to say, "Listen,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. This is what I know. Let me know if there's anything that I can do to help with you." It boggles me that with social media, so many people are so quick to investigate and to share information that these 7 names haven't been released at all, even by their own counterparts, by their own um, fellow soldiers. And I mean, now we have Alex on here, which is one more than what you had before. So,
Well,
um,
I do. Point of clarification:
mhm.
there are a few individuals um, that we know were on the trip. That we've learned from multiple sources were on the trip,
Mhm.
and then there are a few other individuals that we believe were on the trip.
Okay.
Um, the concern I have with the investigators is that they will not confirm the full list to us.
Why
There
do
are,
why do you think that is? I mean, if it's literally just about saying this is who was with Enrique. It doesn't say they did
this
anything. It just says that they were with him.
right. The stated reason is, to maintain the integrity of the investigation. If I may just give an example of where that excuse makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, if if they do have the murder weapon in hand, right? They may not want the suspects or the other or the persons of interest when they go to interview them to know that they have the murder weapon, right? There are good reasons why you may want to interview that person and talk to them about, hey, did you ever uh, possess such and such item or whatever? Try to get admissions from them before they know what the investigator knows. Um, they have a term for this in criminal investigations. They call it guilty knowledge evidence. Things that the investigators know that the only other person on earth who knows it is the one who committed the crime, right? And they want to be able to ask that person about it before it's public knowledge so that if that person confirms knowledge of it, they know they found the guilty party, right? And there are legitimate reasons for that. But to your point, the fact that somebody was on this camping trip does not in any way implicate them in crime. The sheer fact that they were there, right? And so there really, in my mind, is no way in which it could possibly jeopardize the prosecution to share that one little piece of information. And I'll tell you candidly that the last call I had with Major Walters last week, I said this to him and I expressed the same frustration that I'm expressing to you all today. That look, we've been having these calls and I appreciate the details you have shared, but there's a lot you are holding back. And I've given you every reason to trust that if you tell me something and tell me it's sensitive and not to share it, it won't be shared.
Hmm.
And I asked him rhetorically, is there some piece of information you've given me in confidence that you found out I leaked? And he said no. And I said exactly. And after 3 months, that should mean something. And
Hmm.
trust goes both ways. You want us to trust you that you're conducting a thorough investigation. You want us to be patient while you do that and
Hmm.
not be on broadcast news, complaining about your deficient investigation, et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera.
Would that happen at some point? Do you feel
If,
the need that at some point you're like, you know what, I'm not receiving any answers. We need to make
yeah,
this broadcast. We need to just.
yeah. I mean, the way I see it, this is sort of the first salvo of that. Mostly, I'm, doing this at the behest of the family and to answer questions for those of you who know or want to know. But yes, I do. It's always in the back of my mind
Mhm.
that if I'm not getting the information we need from these investigators, then we'll go through Congress or we'll go through the press and do what we need to do. And suffice to say, there are reporters who are also interested in getting answers to some of the same questions that we have and who we've already established relationships with. So if we need to escalate that sort of pressure to get to the truth, then we will. I've tried being patient with them. I'm still trying to be patient with them,
Mhm.
and last week was sort of the last couple weeks, I should say. Things have gone from me sort of patiently just taking in the data they have and posing my questions and taking what I can get, to pushing back a little bit on them that, hey, listen, I really think you ought to be doing this to, shore up this piece. And I really don't understand why you can't answer this question or
Yeah.
this question. This one over here, I get why you want to play that close to the chest for a few months. But this one over here, not hearing a good reason why you can't answer that question. And that makes me wonder, what is your real motive here?
What they're
Are you here to answer my questions, and by doing so help the family get the answers they deserve and get the closure that they so desperately need? Or are you here to control the situation, to control the messaging, to manage the public relations nightmare that this could become for you?
Yeah.
And I think the next few weeks will be a real test of which of those is true. And if it looks to us like we're just being managed and played and strung along, then yeah, we will escalate the pressure in whatever ways we can.
Absolutely. We have a really good question here from Jules. We know in Vanessa Guillen's case, her murderers were given a lie detector test early on. Have they given the 7 lie detector tests?
That's a very good question, and I do not know the answer to that offhand. But I appreciate you posing it, and I will pose it to Major Walters when I speak to him next.
Great. Thank you for that.
Mr. Dustin, I actually do know the answer to that question.
Oh, okay.
If you would like me to answer, yes. I believe within the first week or two, they did conduct a lie detector test. I do know a few specifics of it. I know one person refused altogether to take it, and one didn't pass and pled the 5th right away. So I do know that about it. I don't know if they've been given a second one. I just know that was initially what had first happened.
This is actually all ringing a bell now,
Yes.
that Griselda says it. And obviously, the invocation of the Fifth Amendment and the refusal to submit to a lie detector test are highly suspicious, in the same way that
are they able to really demand that to happen? Or
no, they're not. For better or worse, the Fifth Amendment gives every citizen of the United States, including military service members, the right to avoid implicating themselves in a crime. And if you were asked a question under oath in any context or in any kind of criminal investigation that you cannot answer honestly without implicating yourself in a crime, you are allowed to invoke the Fifth Amendment, and there's nothing that can be done about it.
See, and you would think that if you're innocent, you would just say, yes, let me take this lie detector test. I don't care. I'm innocent. I have nothing to do with this. Let's do it. Let's get it over with.
I concur.
Wow.
Yeah. There are good times for as an attorney. There are times I might instruct my client to invoke the Fifth Amendment, even when I think they aren't technically guilty of a crime, but when I'm concerned that an overzealous prosecutor might try to prosecute them for it anyways, and so it's best just to not comment. So I wouldn't say it's conclusive proof of guilt, but it's definitely very suspicious and typically indicative of guilt.
Yeah. For these 7 individuals, we saw that it was 6 men and 1 female, correct?
Well, I don't have the list in front of me. I would reiterate that we don't know definitively who was on the trip. I believe what you just said is accurate based on who we believe was on the trip.
Got it. Okay.
We do have a list of 7 that we believe are the 7, but we have
one of them being Alex.
We have hodgepodged that together on our own.
Oh wow! So you didn't even get that information from specifically just the confirmation from the Army. It was just.
There have been a couple names that they've sort of let slip in the course of our conversations, but no, they will not. When asked directly who were the full 7, they have refused to confirm it up until this point. And even when I gave them the list of the 7 that we believed it was, like, to the extent you're worried that you're going to tell us something we don't already know, here's the 7 we think it is. Can you at least confirm if we've got it right? They wouldn't do that either.
Wow.
And that was the argument sort of that I had with them just last week.
Yeah.
Now
That has to be so frustrating. I mean,
it is.
as a lawyer and as a family member, you have to be so frustrated that you don't really fully get a full answer from the military, from the Army, who your son was stationed at. That's just
And with the most innocuous, minor detail even. But it's just fundamental to understanding what really happened here. And fundamental to understanding what happened. And as I said, as a lawyer, I see absolutely no way in which it could harm them or their investigation or any future prosecution to share that particular piece of information. So it's really hard for me to understand why it's being withheld.
Yeah. Do you think you're going to find yourself going to North Carolina at some point?
Yes, I do think that's inevitable. And probably it occurs at the phase when we bring in our own forensic experts. My suspicion is if and when we get to a point where they're willing to share the evidence they've gathered with us, they will require us to come to them and view it in person. They aren't just going to like ship it to us and let us review it on our own time and then send it back to them. And there's good reasons for that too. That's not there's when you go to court and you try to present evidence, there are rules of evidence about the chain of custody. They have to make sure they know where the evidence they've gathered is at all times. And that means they can't just entrust it to us and let us bring it back to them. But I do suspect at some point we will have to go to where the evidence is in order to view it.
Yes. We did get a question from iPhone. I'm not sure who the name is. I'm sorry. Is it safe for the Martinez family to go to North Carolina? Would you supply safety for them when they go seek justice?
So I guess what I would say in the inverse is I don't have any reason to believe that they are in danger if they visit North Carolina. But because we know so little, I can't say that definitively. I am not I'm a lawyer, not a security guard.
Yeah.
So it's not really my position to supply them with security, but I definitely don't think it's necessarily a bad idea if they wanted private security for them to seek it.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
It's not something we've really discussed, but I guess I'll say that for Griselda's
Yeah.
benefit.
Griselda, is that something that you have thought about? I know you're thinking about going to North Carolina soon. So is that something that you are thinking about or concerned about?
Not at the moment, just a little bit. Just because I worry about my mom. It's still, we're in the South. She only speaks Spanish, so I do have people that I would like to go with me and accompany me, just so I know she's okay. And I don't have to constantly look after her. But the trip to me on this one is I just want to be able to get some facts straight. Mostly with the medical examiner, and to get a little bit of closure for my mom. So I'm hoping to be able to get a meeting with the medical examiner. This is the person who autopsied his remains, and so my mom could get a little bit of closure. I told Dustin, everything that I had known when I initially spoke to him. Recently, though, I've spoken to one of the agents, and what the medical examiner had told me did not coincide with what the Army said, which is a concern to me. I haven't been able to, I always forget to tell you, Dustin, I'm so sorry. It's at the back of my mind.
Like, oh no.
I know, like now that I'm like, oh, I haven't told you because I keep forgetting that's something I want to tell you. But I do want to speak to the medical examiner who examined his remains to get clarification on a few things that they had mentioned to us. So that is part of the reason I want to go on this trip. And you know, as me and Dustin have spoke about before, we just don't see any reason for the Army to be the one in charge, leading the charge. You know, we were, you know, more, it makes more sense to have the FBI be the ones in charge. So I am hoping I can get a liaison directly to the FBI that me and Dustin can have. I just don't, I just hope I can make that connection and have another briefing with CID again. How Dustin said, a lot of the stuff is just, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to know. So to me, me and him are, you know, we speak about how frustrated we are about the lack of information they've been giving us. So I'm hoping that I can get some more while we're down there in North Carolina. So I'm hoping we can get more information and that I can relay to Dustin, and, you know, well, of course he'll be part of the meeting. But I'm hoping I can get more just in person. It's a little bit different. And you know, I do have to tell him, I do get text messages from reporters, you know, just Dustin has gotten a few that have wanted my referrals to them. So I do want to let them know that the public does want to know an update. You know, the Congresswoman just called me today wanting an update. So
is that Norma Griselda?
Yes, Norma Torres called me today wanting to know more of an update because they are withholding information from her as well. And she wants to push the agenda for a congressional investigation ultimately. Her reasoning is they both work for the federal government. There should be no hidden anything.
No. There's there's definitely no legitimate reason for any federal agency, whether it's the FBI, the Army, any federal apparatus, to withhold information from a U.S. Congresswoman.
Yes.
She is their boss. You know, she appropriates the funds that cause their agency to exist. And I didn't realize until just now. I knew she'd been in contact with Griselda, but I didn't realize that she feels like she's being sort of stonewalled on information as well. That's really disturbing to me.
Yes.
That's their boss. That's, like you just said, that just doesn't make sense.
Not only that, every member of Congress, you know, they take an oath to uphold the Constitution. They are under legal obligations of their own to maintain things in confidence. So they can be briefed on even classified matters that I couldn't dream of ever learning. And so there can be no legitimate reason to withhold information from her, and that is very disconcerting to me to hear that they're not answering her questions.
Wow. I know we're approaching 4:10, and I know we've taken up almost an hour of your time, Dustin, but Griselda, is there any other questions that maybe you may have, or anyone else? Feel free to type them in the chat. That maybe now that we have Dustin here, it would be a great opportunity to just kind of try and get some answers.
I don't have any questions at the moment. Probably just things I have to discuss with Dustin at a later time.
Yeah.
But no questions to him, just things that we probably need to discuss at a later time. If anyone that's joining us today does have any, please feel free. We will answer to our best ability.
Okay, perfect. I saw that, Desiree. This is not a question. I just want to say that I am mad as hell, and I'm ready to make hella noise about it. Also, thank you so much, Dustin. Yes.
I want to thank the family for their strength and patience while we, anybody who's had run-ins with the justice system understands it moves painfully slow, and it's extremely frustrating. And I want to thank them for the opportunity to help them get to the bottom of all of this, and for their patience while I do so. It's I think things are going to come to a head in the near future, and I'm also happy to update all of you. I guess I want to thank everybody here as well for keeping this story active and for expressing an interest and wanting to get involved. This is how change occurs. No one person has the power to change a system as powerful and as big as the U.S. military. Nobody has that power individually, but collectively, nothing can stop us from doing anything.
Yeah.
I'm cautiously optimistic that change is coming with the election, with the social movements that are active right now. I feel like our country's been in a really dark place in recent years, but we are headed in the right direction. And this is one fight in a much bigger war in that regard. And as long as we all stay focused and together and support one another, we will eventually win.
I love that. Dustin, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to ask Mari, si quería decir algunas palabras antes de que nos vayamos. Hay que darle la oportunidad de ser como mamá de Enrique, como mamá de sus hijos, ¿no? Y lo que usted quiera compartir con nosotros.
Pues quiero darle las gracias a todas las personas que me están apoyando para poder encontrar la verdad sobre de mi hijo, ¿verdad? Porque fue el motivo que lo mataron. Y le doy las gracias al abogado que está con nosotros.
Dustin.
¿Ya está?
Not Dustin.
Dustin. Les doy las gracias y le pido de favor, de todo corazón como madre, que encontremos los culpables.
Así será. Así será, Mari.
Oh, que me entiendas como madre, el dolor de madre. Que no puedo aceptar que mi hijo ya no esté conmigo. Yo lo que quiero saber es por qué. ¿Por qué lo mataron? Si era muy buen niño. Y las personas que le hicieron daño no se dieron la oportunidad de conocerlo realmente, que era un buen chico. Y que hubiera sido, si le hubieran dado la oportunidad, que iba a ser un buen amigo para ellos. No sé si no lo conocieron bien, no sé por qué hicieron eso con él. Pero como ser humano, mi niño era muy buena gente. Y nada más quiero saber por qué le quitaron la vida sin él pedir que le quitaran la vida, porque él tenía ganas de vivir, de ser alguien en la vida. Y les doy las gracias por oír la historia de mi hijo y cómo va el proceso. Lo único que pido y le pido a usted, ¿cómo se llama? Dustin, que me ayudes y me apoyes.
So just to translate for everybody, my mom wants to thank everybody who took part in this call today. She thanks you guys all very much, especially for sharing anything about his story and helping his story spread. She wants to especially thank Dustin so much for being our lawyer and looking out for us as you take the calls and the briefings and everything. And she just wants everyone to know that Enrique was a good person, and she doesn't know if these people that he went with actually knew who he was as a person, because if they would have taken the time to know who he was, they would have known that Enrique was a really great person who really cared about people, and he was a great friend. And that, again, Dustin, she really thanks you a lot for everything that you've done for us as a family, and, helped us with the Army, because we are frustrated. She loves that you're just as frustrated as us. It's very hard, and you are with us in this battle, as everybody is with us in this battle. And she just wants to thank everybody, just more than anything, that Enrique did not ask to be killed. He wanted to live. He wanted to have a life. Now he's not here. He does not have a legacy. He cannot have a legacy. And hopefully, as long as we get justice for him, he'll be able to have one.
my Spanish is a little rusty, but I did catch the gratitude, and I couldn't be prouder of the work that we're doing on this case, and it is my honor to help you guys in any way that I can. Nobody should have to go through what you've been through. You know, there's a quote I use in almost every closing argument where I bring discrimination cases against employers. Martin Luther King said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And I believe that. I firmly believe that. It is slow. It goes in fits and starts. You take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but we always make progress. And this is just one more step in that fight. And, you know, I'm dedicated to helping you in any way I can.
Thank you, Dustin. Let me just translate really quick for yo ver que él está con nosotros y que él no sabe tanto el español, pero sí lo entendió que tú le estás dando tanto la gracia y que cada vez que él va a un caso dice que él le gusta usar unas palabras de Martin Luther King, en que él dijo que justicia es como una arca y se dobla de muchas maneras, pero siempre se dobla al lado de la justicia que todos vamos a agarrar. Tomas 2 pasos y uno trazado. Es largo, pero siempre la justicia va a prevaler.
Thank you so much, Destiny.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. A big, huge thank you to the Martinez family, Griselda, Doña Mari, and also Dustin, the family lawyer who's taken on this case. And thank you so much for your time, for your words, for your for letting us know, giving us any updates, and please let us know if there's anything that we can do to assist you.
Thank you for hosting this, and I'd say in the short term, call your congressman, your congresswoman, tell them you want them to support Congresswoman Torres's proposal to open an investigation, a congressional investigation into this, especially since it sounds like she's not getting answers either. That is unacceptable, regardless of what actually took place. It's unacceptable for the Army to be that tight-lipped with Congress. That's just not all right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Everybody have a great day. Great rest of your
Take
day.
care.
For your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gris, do you want to stick around for a little bit?
I can.
Oh, you gotta go. No,
can't.
we'll talk later. We'll talk later. Besitos.
Okay.
Hablamos.
I forgot to tell you. I have a meeting with Joe Collins, so that's probably why. So that's why.
All good. You kill it, girl. Hasta luego.
you.
Un abrazo.
Thank you. Bye.